It's a very similar design to the Lansky system. The same steps would work for either. The way this system works is it comes with a vise guide block, a fine Arkansas stone, a coarse Arkansas stone, and then a medium grip stone with a triangular shape that's designed for sharpening the serrated portion of a blade. Then the kit also comes with a small bottle of honing oil and 3 guide rods. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to thread in your rods for any of the stones that you plan on using. They just quickly thread in, snug them in hand tight. You're going to want to fold out the wings. Once this is clamped, we're going to take a little bit of honing oil. The honing oil is actually optional. I like to use it. Some people don't. Some people just use water. Some people don't use anything. They just dry hone. The solution generally helps keep your stone clean. As you're cutting on the edge of your knife, you're basically grinding real small particles off of the edge, and those small particles can build up on your stone. I prefer to use the solution just to help keep that from being an issue. This clamp has 2 angles. It's got a 25 degree and then a 20 degree. I usually try to match whatever the knife's original factory edge is. Some people prefer to use one angle over another for different purposes. It looks like on this particular knife, I'm going to say that 20 is probably the closest for this knife. Yeah, that's a fairly good match. There's a lot of different opinions on the proper stroke, what method to use to sharpen your knife. I've seen a lot of people review this particular system that literally just doing this kind of motion. Sometimes they're just stopping, coming partially up the blade. Personally, I think ideally you want each stroke to cover the entire length of the blade. Especially over time, if you continue to do the same strokes and you hit one spot more than another, you're going to cut deeper on some parts of your blade than others. You're going to start having different heights of metal in your blade, especially if you start focusing on one part of the blade more than others. You're going to be cutting this deeper than you are up here, and you're not going to be able to get that smooth, consistent edge unless you do a major grind and really take a lot of material off your blade to even it all back out. Now the other thing you want to do is you want to count how many times you do a pass on each side, because you want to balance. You want to balance. If you do 10 strokes on this side, you want to do 10 strokes on the other side. And that's important because if you don't, your tip is going to start pushing more to one side than the other. Because as you're cutting it this way, you then want to cut it the other way to bring that angle back. One quick way to tell if your knife's been balanced or not, you want to see this edge, the cut portion or the grinded portion that you're grinding with the stone, you want to see that be in the same thickness all the way down. And then when you flip it over, it should have the same thickness, and again, consistent for the full length of the blade. If you see it going thinner and thicker, that's usually a sign that you're not maintaining the same proper angle. If it's just really wide on one side and very narrow on the other, that usually means that it's not balanced and you did a lot more cutting on one side versus the other side. I usually like to work with sets per side. I usually start, especially with a knife like this where there's not a lot of edge to work with, I'll start with the coarse stone, and I will start with, say, 10 strokes per side. And then I usually work my way downwards. I go down by 2s. So then I would generally go 10, then 8, then 6, then 4, and then I'll start working down by 1s, 3, 2, 1. I also tend to reduce the pressure as I progressively go down. So I put a little more pressure on the earlier sets, and that creates more of a burr. So what happens when you're going back and forth is you're cutting that burr off. Every time you're doing one side, you're building up a burr. Then you do the opposite side, you're going to cut that burr off. As lightening your pressure, you're reducing the amount of burr that you're going to be putting on there, and you're also kind of just honing and polishing that edge. You really want to polish. What we're trying to do in the last phases is basically just polish that blade and smooth it out and just make it as sharp as possible. That's really when you get your razor sharp edges, is really depending on how much time you work on polishing. And that would finish for the coarse stone. So now we can kind of take a look at it. We can kind of see, examine it, make sure we don't have any nicks. We want to look to see if we got a nice smooth. It won't be a mirror polish yet because this was a coarse stone. But what we are looking for is to try to remove as many of those nicks as possible to try to keep that smooth blade. And ideally we want to see the thickness of the angled portion of your edge to be uniform all the way down. This is the Arkansas fine stone. Put a little bit of oil on there. And I'm going to do the same thing. You should see that now your edge is a much cleaner. You shouldn't see as much of the texture. It's still not a mirror polish because I didn't spend the time to put a mirror kind of polish on this edge. So I'm going to go ahead and unclamp this and we're going to see how we did. There's a noticeably better edge just from the feel, the tackiness. It's a much stickier, tackier feel. So let's try the paracord first. Take our piece of paracord. And I'm just going to put it on the smooth flat spot, and that was much easier. Nice single pass. Let's try our paper. I don't know if I got it sharp enough yet to really see it on the paper. We'll see how it does. That's better. It's snagging. It's still not a clean cut, but it snags a little better. It's not what I'd call razor sharp by any means, but it's sharper than it was. I think for the little bit of time we spent on it, I don't think it did that bad.